Cemetery and Beyond, 大头洲. What will come to your mind when we talk about islands in Hong Kong? A place you go on a holiday, somewhere full of tourists, or lands for recreation. On the other hand, there are also islands we treat them as an urban fringe, flooded with unwanted purposes. Among many islands in Sai Kung Sea, which all we see is green and blue, a beautiful haven. There is one island full of nothing but grayish tombstones, 大头洲, the cemetery of fishermen. The establishment of cemetery on the island is closely connected to the trajectory of fishermen industry, proceeding from a discriminated group to the heart of Sai Kung's economy in the 1960s, snowballing the momentum of assigning a centralized cemetery to this wandering population which used to bury everywhere they can reach. But ever since the construction of High Island Reservoir, passageway for larger fishing vessels were blocked. The industry started its decline and transformed into fish farming. However, it did not stop the need of burial sites on the island. Instead, it gave a boost, stemming from loads of grave relocation from the flood area. The island then has been established as a cemetery for only fishermen, and receiving the deceased and more relocation of grave from adjacent developments including Gao Sai Zhao, a large island turned into a golf course right next to Dai Tao Zhao. The location of burial was not a careful decision with examination of energy flows. Instead, it was simply driven by accessibility and the urge of being ground after their long floating life, following a basic logic of being backed by mounds and facing the sea. Tombstones populate and grave occupy as much land as they want to. The cemetery grew exponentially until the green and lush landscape that the ancestor yearned for has become a slum of grayish concrete. Land clearance and visiting practices with fire also covered the island in ashes and rendered the green and lush into burnt field in brown. Other than the expansion and risk, the cemetery is also foreseen to vanish because of its very specific requirement of admission and the declining population of the whole industry. Moreover, the lack in supervision on the island also received appeals from public to regulate and enforce law of temporal rents for ground burial practices. The lineage may one day defunct. Remains of the deceased may be requested to relocate. How do we respond to both rise and fade, and the abundance of graves, yet emptiness of purposes, except a place of taboo? These are few questions, limits, but inspires the design for the future of the island. Stemming from its organic sprawl of the cemetery, every road on the island is only leading to a tomb. We arrive, we pay our respect, and we leave. The design proposal transformed graves from the end of visits to an intentional detour from a continuous trail across the island, condensed into a network of paths leading to different experiences with every visit. Responding to the growing population of tombs, the design rethinks how we can be buried. By dissecting the act of building a tomb, extracting its essence, which is putting a stone onto the ground, to mark one's existence and the permanence of our memories on this ever-changing landscape. To plan future expansion without turning the island into a slightly organized concrete piece, stones can be buried in advance to mark future burial sites in a suitable density. Stone will be selected, unearthed, and its surrounding will be terraformed into enclosing shapes similar to the armchair style they have across the island upon burial. The stone can be cut, polished, and engraved into tombstone, and the leftovers could lay a path to the grave. Unused grave will be seen as a common exposed rock on the landscape, while grave with the deceased buried can be concealed from the vision of unrelated visitors behind this little mound they formed. Without posing an obvious occupation, the burial of ancestors moved beyond occupying. Beyond marking our one's existence on the land, we bond ourselves to the land. Beyond putting a permanent monument, burying the deceased become the part of the process in the landscape. Considering a fate of usage in the foreseeable future, The design explores how the landscape can recover from a grave after the end of lineage. The terraformed offering ground instead of concrete surfaces allows regeneration of ground covers when the grave is less and less visited. The crater shape became a bowl, gathering littering and seedlings, allows sprouting of the young forest with graves as their attractor. The introduction of fire-tolerating plantations side by side with its new grave were laid out to contain wildfire. The newly bloomed forests from abandoned graves further densified and therefore detained the fire if any. Relatives of who passed away may in grief for years, soaked in urns and memories. The designed cemetery provides solitude moments for one to process the pain, at the same time reveal the passage of time to remind their need for moving on. Embracing the abandonment of grave allowed to turn into nurture grounds for the next generation of life, either the establishment of a forest or helping their descendants to move on with their life. The design also leads visitors into the island itself, beyond the cemetery, switching focus from the past to the present, from our kind to species and nature. They close their eyes in front of tombstones of their ancestors to revisit bonds between them. It is time to pass on the relationships to their children, their family members. Maze of stone pillars on the way of traversing provide moments to spend their focus with younger members in the lineage. They pay offerings and ask for blessings to the lineage from the ancestors, but it is also important for them to be aware that their offerings has always been a blessing to another kind. Offerings used to be left on grounds after worshipping. Wildlife attracted by them disturbs other visitors. It is now being brought away after visiting to these cascade of stone steps and rising stone pillars as altar for birds and wild boars, linking feed and fed relationship back to the hand of visitors. Visits to the island became more than offerings to the past and blessing their descendants. They offer to nature, blessed beyond our kind. Visitors are guided to the highest point of the island in a slowing pace, with curbstones morphing into seats as a hint. As their ancestors, in every tombstone, witness the growth and fate of their lineage, rise and fall of surrounding wildlife. The whole island is also a grave, but not in terms of a terminal. As witnesses to the rise and fall of the industry, the progress of history, which are all visible within the bay that the island sheltered, just like the tomb enclosing their visiting descendants. The island now moved beyond a host of graves, but also the grave itself, as an interface between the watching and the living, a witness to lineage, industry, history, and the landscape. Beyond an island, beyond a cemetery, Daitaozhao could be a place of rise and fade. Visiting could become blessings. The living and the deceased are both witnesses of the past and the future.